We're talking with Richard Lang about his latest book, First Responders Guide to UFO Encounters. This is not just hypothetical exercises here. There are real-life cases where police and fire and first responders had to deal with UFO-type incidents. We're going to hear some of those right after this and take some of your calls as well as Coast to Coast AM continues. Richard Lang, we're not just talking about hypotheticals here. There are real-life cases where police have been called to the scene, where first responders arrive and dealing with the really unusual situations. You document some of them in your new book, right?
Yes. We put a section in the book that it's basically police cases. And there, some of the ones that I put in my book are some of the older ones that were just like really, really interesting cases. But that happens probably a lot. You know, it happens obviously a lot more than ever gets in the in the public domain. I think part of that, the problem is that with police agencies and sheriff's departments, in Virginia, the sheriffs are elected. So they're always on guard. You know, they're always worried about what the public perception is. And up until very recently, this kind of thing was pretty taboo and not really something that they want to, deal with with the public. So a lot of times if there were cases where, cops or deputies have encounters or saw something or more common, they respond to someone who reports something, they were pretty careful about keeping it confidential just because they weren't prepared to deal with the controversy that would be, it would be caused by that. But I think now, like in my book, I wrote a chapter about reporting and what the kinds of questions that you want to ask someone if you're an officer and you respond. Basically with police, there's two things. Is one, you roll up upon something that's happening, but more commonly, I think you'd be called and you respond to an individual or a couple of individuals, and they'll say, "You won't believe what just happened to me." I was walking over here in the pasture by my house, and here's what I saw. So some of them experience it personally, and probably more often they respond to someone that reports something. And part of the reason that I wrote my book was that if they do respond in the past, a lot of times the police would just think this person's insane, or they've lost it, they're having some kind of mental breakdown. At least now I think they'd be a little more objective to, somebody says, is it something landed in the pasture in my backyard and there was an entity involved. I think that once somebody reads my book, they might take it more seriously.
Yeah, I mentioned at the top of your segment here, this incident in Las Vegas from this past year, where police were called. This family was freaking out. They saw something in the backyard. They said there were 8 to 10 foot tall aliens, and the police handled it very professionally. They took it seriously, and you can tell from the body camera video that they were a little nervous about looking around for these things. They thought there was something legitimate there.
Well, I yes, and I think that probably does happen. And even with us when we were working on the Star Team cases, somebody reports something, you get down there, you're always a little careful and worried about what might happen. Most often when you're investigating those things, it's a past event, so it's not in progress anymore. But I think police would be more likely to get involved in something that was like unfolding.
You've dealt with law enforcement a lot, worked in law enforcement, federal and local. What is the attitude of police in general about the topic? Are they sort of closet believers, or do they scoff and dismiss it, as so many do?
Well, I think it depends on the individual. As indicated, I recently had a conversation with the sheriff in the county where I live, and he's a person that's very interested in the UFO phenomenon to begin with. And, I just given him a copy of my book. I haven't talked to him about the book since I gave it to him. But, he told me I live in an area where it's very rural. There's like hundreds of acres of forest land around here. And, like something, he sort of alluded that one night something happened that probably landed there, and they really didn't know what to do about it or what to do with it or whatever, And that's like everything else, I think that the perception about this is dramatically changing. So, if you talk to somebody 10 years ago, they might be, yeah, right, so what, but now they're like, okay, they're talking at 6 o'clock news, they're talking about, spacecraft wreckage and non-human alien bodies. And so they're starting to take it more seriously, if that makes sense.
I remember back in the 90s, there was some sort of a manual put out for firefighters about how to deal with a UFO type situation, and it got a lot of coverage back then. You remember that one?
I do.
And it was, the legitimate issues were raised in these kind of scenarios. There are often failures of communications equipment. There are disruptions in transportation. Those are real considerations, right?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. The radio interruptions and computer equipment, real common. I can't tell you how many cases I've looked at where somebody would try to photograph something that's in close proximity and the cameras won't work, the batteries go dead, they malfunction. And even one of the weirdest phenomena I've ever seen is you've got three people and there's something hovering at close proximity, and the three of them can see it. The person pulls out their video camera, flips the screen open, and points the camera right at the object, and there's nothing on the screen. You can see it, but it won't show up in the camera.
I know you advise the police not to get close to these craft. If they see one, don't put their hands on it, and don't pull their guns on strange beings. But, people, as we know from history, people can't seem to help themselves when they see UFOs. They start shooting at them, which is a bad idea.
Well, it's a bad idea because again, you're dealing with an entity that's much more technologically advanced than we are. And there are cases where, particularly I know of a couple of cases like on a military base, Air Force base, where they've been shot. And they're subject to kinetic energy weapons, speeding bullets, if you will, like anything else, and they can be shot and killed. And they have been shot and killed before. But if you were to encounter something like that, I think you would be. I really don't think going to guns on them is the right answer. I think if you're a cop, you're going to have a gun in your duty belt, and you probably just should. I don't think having it in your duty belt would be a really big problem, but you don't want to take it out of the holster.
You said they've been shot and killed, for sure?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there's cases. I've had. Well, if you've read some of the Filer files that George Filer did, there's accounts in there of people, shooting them on. There's one on an Air Force base, I think, and killed it.
Have you had any response from police agencies? Has anyone seen the book yet and asked you to come and maybe talk to them?
Well, that's where I'm at right now. We just put the book out last week, and I'm in the process of pushing it out to some of these police departments. My local sheriff here had said something about me coming and talking to his guys, and that's kind of what we're doing. There's a group of us that we recently put together. It's called Aerospace Research Operations, and it's a group where we're doing like consulting, training, that kind of thing, and we're trying to figure out a way to push out to police departments. I'm probably going to mail that book out to a bunch of these guys around here and try to promote it that way. But
I think I'll send a copy to the Las Vegas Metro Police because actually they handled the situation pretty well. They took it seriously. They didn't assume that the family was crazy. They came back a couple of times, but you could tell from the body cam audio and video that they were kind of nervous about it. They weren't quite sure. I wrote Call that night. I mean, the story about this encounter spread through the police ranks really quickly.
Well, yeah, and I see like there was one of the communities did kind of a tabletop exercise where they pretended like a UFO crashed, and there was a video and all that. And when I was watching it, I was thinking they should have read my book first. It'd have been much more realistic if they'd had access to my book before they produced that. But that's where I'm at with it. Is we're going to just try to get it out to, if you give me the person to send it to, I'll get a copy of it out to them.
All right. We've got a bunch of people on the phones. Let's see what's on their mind. East of the Rockies, right. Barry in South Carolina. Barry, old buddy, old pal. How you doing?
George, I tell you what, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. I tell you, you're so knowledgeable and so entertaining. And boy, oh boy, you're playing my Lord Huron. I love the guy, and you do too, obviously. Yep. His music is so provocative.
Yeah, it's good stuff. It's a fixture on Coast to Coast when I'm hosting the show. What's on your mind, Barry?
I know it. I believe that the Phoenix Lights, I think it was 1998, a group of UFOs flew over Phoenix, and nobody could explain them. George, I feel like they are truly alien visitors. They're tourists traveling, exploring the universe, and they look at us as just another group of ants running around on the ground.
Richard, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that a lot of people ask me when I do my presentations, what do you think their intentions are? Or they, everything that I've ever been exposed to in terms of interviewing contactees and abductees, I think that the ETs are very concerned about our well-being, particularly like in the use of nuclear weapons and the potential to destroy the planet. I think that's a big part of their agenda and concern. That the potential for a nuclear disaster that could really destroy this planet we live on. And I think that a lot of what's going on with them is they're very concerned about that. Particularly, I think that some of this stuff in Congress, it resulted because there's some reports of these UFOs going into restricted airspace over military facilities and nuclear weapons storage areas and things like that. But I believe that that's part of their agenda, is that they're concerned about that. And as we move on, and particularly with quantum physics, when I was in college a long time ago, what they taught us in physics class then and now is much different. And the quantum physicists will tell you that, when you detonate a nuclear weapon, the energy from that transcends outside this time-space reality we live in, and it goes into other dimensions, and it interrupts the fabric of space, which is potentially dangerous to, a galactic or an alien community, if that makes sense. And I really think that's a big part of why they spend so much time surveying our stuff.
Well, maybe they live here,
Say what again?
Maybe they live here.
You mean like in other dimensional existences, or
something like that, or under the ocean, or something along those lines? I mean, they seem to be more concerned about the planet than maybe they are about us. Well,
there was people ask, well, where do they come from, and other planets or other dimensions, and some of them come from other time constraints, particularly in the future. And one of the most interesting one that I've ever heard anybody talk about was that someone in a contact situation, and the entities basically told them that they were from the future, and that they said, us, Earth people, are their ancestors, and if you guys destroy this planet, then we won't exist. Think about that for a while.
Yeah, it's hard to wrap your head around that. Thanks for the call, Barry. West of the Rockies, Aaron in Fountain Valley, California. Hi, Aaron. What's on your mind?
Hey, George. I can quickly explain that to you from Michael Crichton's The Sphere. As the robot's cameras focus on the open panel, labels in English indicate the spacecraft is actually a U.S. spacecraft constructed in the future and sent through time, appearing on the seabed at least 350 years before its creation. So it's a Boeing. It's if you've seen the movie, you know, and it's crazy because, I mean, George, I just opened up my internet like 20 minutes ago, and you appeared. It says the UFO Reporter Part 1, the files of George Knapp, 5 hours ago, News Nation. And I was like researching what to say. But, you know, Michael Crichton, the story follows Norman Johnson, a psychologist engaged by the United States Navy who joined a team of scientists assembled to examine a spacecraft of unknown origin discovered on the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. And basically he wrote a criteria to the president, and he was just doing it for the money because he didn't want to lose his tenure, but he got the funding and all that, but it got to like Bush, kind of like in that time period when Michael Crichton wrote it, you know? So I was just kind of like throwing that out there. I respect all you gentlemen. God bless you.
Well, thanks, Aaron. We'll share that with Richard Lang here and see how he takes it. So he's suggesting sort of what you were touching on just a minute ago, Richard.
That some of this stuff comes from points in the future.
Yeah. It's kind of a twist like the end of Planet of the Apes or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, you're dealing with entities that have technology that's 1,000 years more advanced than ours. So, the consensus is that some of them can manipulate time, you know, and even in certain types of abduction cases, there's, you know, what we call missing time and stuff like that, and time dilation. So, yeah, there's something to that. And, you know, the possibility of something from the future coming back here, you know, I just think it's part of the scenario. Usually, I would say that, you know, in my book, I said there's 3 sources. 1 is other planets, 2 is other dimensions, and 3 is possibly from future points in time.
Yeah, the fact is we don't know, do we? I mean, we've got a lot of theories, and probably somewhere there's more solid evidence stashed in a hangar somewhere, but we really don't know the answer to any of the big questions, where they're from, why they're here, what their interest is in us, do we?
Well, we can only speculate. Yes, I think some people say, oh, they're, you know, they're here to destroy us. Well, the only thing I can say about that is if they wanted to destroy us, we'd be gone a long time ago.
I agree with you.
Certainly do that easily.
We're talking with Richard Lang about his new book, First Responder's Guide to UFO Encounters. It's good stuff. When we come back, we'll take more of your calls. We're talking with Richard Lang about his latest book, First Responder's Guide to UFO Encounters. We'll get back to more of your calls in a moment, and also hear from Richard about a really dramatic case where some cops in Texas encountered something very strange. We'll be right back. Richard, I mentioned in your book you have several real-life encounters between police and UFOs and UFO occupants. There's one case from Indiana, 1957, that I have to believe is an inspiration for a scene out of Close Encounters, the Spielberg movie, and then where they chased it. They chased this UFO for miles. You have another one from Texas, Damon, Texas, 1965. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, basically, the interesting thing about this case is that there were the deputy sheriffs were out, and there was like a football game or something they were covering. But in any event, there was a light that they noticed that was pretty far away, and as they watched it, the next thing you know, it kind of hovered over their car. And so they had a fairly close encounter with it, and they were scared. But one of the most interesting parts of this case was that the deputy had he had been injured. His child had like a little alligator that was a pet, and the thing had bitten him pretty bad in his finger, and it was all swelled up and bandaged and everything. And at that night after the encounter, the next morning, his hand was completely healed, which was really interesting. And I had done some research about that kind of thing, and there's like a lot of accounts of where people have had encounters where they've had some type of illness, and when that afterwards it was gone. All kinds of things like cancer and different things that apparently they've healed them for whatever reason.
I know you've worked with contactees and what we used to call abductees a lot over the years. I've seen a transition from in terms of attitudes about those experiences, whereas it used to be seemingly terrifying, as I imagine it would be. There's sort of a movement in those circles these days to suggest that it's really a very positive experience in the long run. Is that how you perceive this?
Well, yes, I think that there are, the whole abduction scenario is it's very complex, and there are different things that happen. Some people, particularly women in childbearing ages, they'll come back from something like that and experience what feels like a miscarriage, and certain kind of exams that they're put through, which are rather unpleasant. But a lot of times these people will say that they've given them visions or shown them visions and of things where that it's more positive, like for healing the earth and leading to higher levels of human consciousness. So yeah, I would say that you've got the whole spectrum there. And then one of the things that's always totally amazed me is what they call millabs, where people claim that there's what appears to be uniformed military people involved in the in the crafts and stuff like that, which just I could never figure that one out. But
no, I'm mystified by that as well. We'll take some calls. West of the Rockies, Ron in Dallas. Hi, Ron. You're on with Richard Lang. He's on East, okay.
Hello.
Hi, Ron. How you doing?
Good morning. How you guys doing today?
Good. What's on your mind?
All right. Well, I was let you know that I work within law enforcement. I worked for over 20 years, and together with all the agencies I worked with, I worked in for over 40 years. And we receive no information on this, no training whatsoever in that. But being involved in this ever since I was a kid, I was always interested in UFOs and that. I've always waited. We've had some people call into the dispatch, and because I worked out in the big city in it, seeing things, and of course they kind of like laugh it off. But I've had my personal experience with UFOs and that, and even got in a physical fight with one of the Greys.
Let's hear it.
Well, apparently I've been visited a number of times in that, and even implants that have been taken out of me, and they're already being researched in a lab. But they were doing some kind of procedure on me, and I woke up from it, and this was inside my house. And when I woke up, I just grabbed this entity that was there. It was gray, and I just started punching the heck out of it. And I had you're right about weapons. Never use a weapon, especially people that live in cities and that, because when you fire off that weapon, you're responsible wherever that bullet goes in it, and it can go through walls and everything else and hit a neighbor next door. And that. So I made up my own little device in that, more or less a wooden stick in that with a pointed end on it. And if they ever came back, I was going to use that hand-to-hand combat, more or less. And that. But before I could try to get it, this thing, both of them, there was two in a room. They just went right through the roof, just right through and gone. And that, but most of my stuff I have documented. It's being researched by one of the guys that's been on your shows several times, in it, Daryl Sims. And the implants are now being researched. But law enforcement, yeah, you're right. Is that there's hardly any information. I think you're right. In the foreseeable future here, you're going to see more of this that will be offered in training classes, or what we call continuous education for our law enforcement certifications, and that, of what to do in case you come across something like this.
So when you had this punch out with an alien, were you an officer at the time?
Oh yeah, just a few years ago. I still work with law enforcement.
Richard, thoughts?
Yeah, I was just processing what he was saying. It sounds like that it happened in his house, right?
That's correct. This is something, let me tell you, in law enforcement is that I could not go to my lieutenant or captain saying, yeah, I can't come into work today because I'm a little banged up from getting in a fight with an alien. What are they going to do? They're going to send you off and say, we got somebody that can help you out and talk to you. They're going to send you for a psych evaluation, and they're going to say,
exactly. Yes.
So what do you do?
So when you had this encounter, was it at night? Like, were you asleep and then woke up in the middle of it, or something like that, or how did it occur?
That's correct. It was around like 3 o'clock in the morning. I was asleep and I woke up because I was starting to choke. Whatever they were doing something down my throat, and I started coughing and choking in it, and that's how I woke up from. However, they try to put a person into sleep mode, more or less.
Well, one of the things that you said that's very common, although it's a little hard to understand, is you said they went right through the ceiling or went right through the wall. And on many, many, many cases that I've looked at, people say that kind of thing. And as unbelievable as it sounds, that there's so many reports of it, there has to be something to it. Where they
Ron, thank you for the
go through the wall. Yeah,
Ron, thanks for the call. Thanks for sharing that story. We appreciate it. You might want to check out Richard Lang's book. First-time caller Andrew in Lancaster, California. Andrew, welcome to Coast to Coast. Andrew, are you there?
Oh,
I think we're. Hi, Andrew. You're on Coast to Coast. What's on your mind?
yes, sir. Thank you for having me tonight. I was stationed at Edwards Air Force Base from 2004 to 2008, and I experienced a lot of paranormal experiences there.
Like what?
From seeing, do you know that there's a Bigfoot that lives up there? They call them the Blue Eyes.
Near Edwards? Yeah?
Yeah. Blue Eyes, yes.
I hadn't heard that, no. I've heard about Bigfoot near other military facilities, including the Nevada test site, but no, I didn't know about Edwards. Did you want to share with us what happened to you?
Yeah, I was stationed there from 2004 to 2008. And I've from my experience, there's something going on out there, Edwards. I just want to say that, yeah.
Okay. All right. Andrew, thanks for calling in. We're glad you're listening to Coast to Coast. You're welcome to call another time if you want to share some further details with us, but we appreciate you. We're going to the wild card line. Joe in Monterey. Hi, Joe. Good morning. What's on your mind?
Thank you, George, for taking my call.
Sure.
I'm a contactee or an experiencer, and what I've experienced is that you might want to consider that they do a lot of mind control. And it doesn't have to be from their technology, which they do have a lot of technology, that they can allow you to believe what you want to believe, but they can control what you believe and what you experience. You may be thinking that they're good, but they don't have to be good at all. They could be really deeply evil, and you wouldn't know it because they can change your memory. And that has happened. How do you compensate, or how do you allow for the possibility that your people may be under an illusion of that, these are okay, it's okay to be there? And the after effect, how do you check or debrief your people and see if there's any tampering mentally? Thank you, George, for taking my call.
Thanks. That's an interesting point there, Richard. I mean, there are screen memories that pop up in these encounters, right?
Yeah, well, a lot of times people that have close encounters, as I said, they do something to them where they can't remember it. And really, some of the research where you're using regression hypnosis, it's really astonishing what, if you've ever been involved in that, where, they'll take someone and basically hypnotize them, and then they'll start telling you like blow for blow details about what happened to them, and it's eerie. But but on the surface, they don't remember any of it.
Yeah. We're going to Bill in Los Angeles on the wildcard line. Hi, Bill. Good morning. How you doing?
Hi, George. George and Richard. As a former newspaper reporter, I'm struck by the ongoing disinformation campaign by the corporate media and government scientists. For instance, about 3 weeks ago, Washington Post columnist Hugh Hewitt on his radio show denigrated Congressman Jim Burchett, the David Grush defender, as, quote, Mr. UFO. And then, George, you remember a few weeks ago that NASA's Robert Nemiroff suggested that Tic Tac was a computer glitch until you diplomatically straightened him out on that. And then a few days later, a scientist named Bren told George Norrie that Tic Tac was just a laser pointer dot. And in a rare moment of pushback, George Norrie straightened him out and said, no, those are structured craft. And then a couple days after that, I asked Robert Zimmerman, the scientist, how he can explain this 55,000 mile per hour transmedium craft on the Tic Tac video that can do these 90-degree breakaways. And he had no explanation for it, but he said, I'm skeptical that it's from another world. So, Richard, given that disinformation campaign, how likely is it, do you think, you can overcome this fog, this information fog, and make first responders take UFOs seriously?
Well, I mean, what you're saying is people are twisting and putting a spin on it in a negative way. What I've tried to do with my book is just be totally forthcoming and basically start out, here's a little bit about my background. Not that I'm narcissistic, but I want to make sure they know I know what I'm talking about. But a little bit about the history and how this has developed, and then a little bit about, what might happen in terms of disclosure in that process that they'll probably go through. Talking about, there's a chapter in there on the high strangeness, when you're talking about transmedium vehicles and things like that. And then there's a chapter in there, like a scenario, like if something does come down, here's what's going to happen, And I've actually got some pictures in there of a recon team that was out on the road one day that I was lucky enough to get some pictures of that's in the book. But basically explain to them how it would unfold and then what their role might be in that. And then particularly a chapter on what they should do and not do if they have a close encounter. And, the details about the physiological, the things that, can affect you or harm you. And then a little bit about like going forward with disclosure. So what my purpose is that as indicated and all the people that I'm talking to out there that are in law enforcement will tell you that there's never been any kind of training about UFOs, extraterrestrials, in any way, in any police academy or any law enforcement training. So what my purpose was is to write this book, and at least someone that reads my book will have a better understanding of what potentially could happen out there, and if they're involved in it, it would be they wouldn't be completely blindsided or surprised by what happened. They at least understand what was going on, and that's it.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for the call. Thanks to all of our callers. Richard, it kind of reminds me, you would obviously know about this, but the Air Force Academy, there was a textbook years ago. I've mentioned it on the air a few times. They had a textbook with a chapter about UFOs in which they told these future Air Force pilots and officers, hey, in the course of your career as a pilot, you might encounter one of these things, and it speculated on where they're from and how many different races of visitors there might be here. And I know that when the word got out to the UFO public that the chapter was as part of this textbook, it was pulled. So, kind of reminds me of you're filling the same kind of a gap and providing a service that could be valuable. Not every cop, not every firefighter or first responder is going to see these things in the course of their careers, but some will.
And the whole idea is that if you, because you've never had any training about it and you may not have had an interest in it, if you find yourself in the middle of one of these events it would terrify you. And you know, the more you understand something and the more you know about it, the easier it is to deal with it, and the more control you have over your situation. And that's where I'm coming from with my book. And you know, one of the things we talked about is going in. I'm probably going to spend some time going to some of these police academies and training academies and see if I can get them to use my book as part of their curriculum.
Good. I enjoyed it. Thanks, Richard. You're always welcome here. Keep me in the loop.
Thank you. Yeah,
Alrighty.
thank you. Thank you again, George. Good talking to you as always.
All right. Thanks also to my first guest, Jay Ingram, and to my colleagues there at Coast to Coast, Adam Thompson and Donna Walker, Michael Cosio, Lex Lonehood, Dan Galante, Chris Boros, Lisa Lyon, Tom Danheiser, and, of course, George Norrie. I'm George Knapp. I'll be back next Sunday night. Good night, everyone.